Turn by McKenna. Lovely cushion header. And Gerrard! What a head, son! What a head! Aguero!
Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Trio podcast. My name is Ciaran and I'm joined by our resident host, Haider. How are you doing today, Haider?
I'm good, mate. I'm sitting in my armchair. I'm having a nice day off today. I'm letting Ciaran do the duties. Yeah, mate. Look, I'm all right. You know, we obviously seen the last sort of 24, 48 hours as a United fan has not been the best. But you know what? I did fantastically well last week on fantasy football, which has not been something I've done on the first game week for at least 2 or 3 years. So yeah, mate, I'm ready to win the league and I'm ready to smash it again this weekend.
Yeah, maybe I should take my own advice this weekend instead of just ignoring it all. But yeah, we're back for week 2 of the Fantasy Football Show. Just everybody make sure you like, subscribe, get involved, ask any questions during the week so that we can kind of go through it here. So yeah, week 2 brings about a lot of new things with Utd City starting to play. But what we're going to do at the start is just kind of recap last week. It was a weird week. Some of the players we expected to do well didn't. Some that the newer faces actually performed well. So what we're going to start off with is kind of the top point scorers from last week from each position, whether we think if it was a surprising one or it was quite expected. So we're going to alternate from last week. So this week I'll take the goalkeepers and midfielders and Haider will take the defenders and the strikers. So first of all, in goal. So we had a top 3 or 4 here. And to start off with, Guaita from Crystal Palace. He was a top scorer with 10 points. Now, anyone that saw the game, he pretty much saved Crystal Palace skin against Southampton. So he ended up with 10 points. He had 5 saves, finished in 90 minutes, got a clean sheet, and ended up getting 3 bonus points. So again, I think that all came down to the saves and how he kind of distanced himself from the next couple of names. Next was Jordan Pickford for Everton with 8 points as well, got his clean sheet. He made 5 saves as well, got 1 bonus point and played the 90 minutes. We then had kind of a tie for a third with Newcastle's Darlow and also Bernd Leno from Arsenal. The difference was that Darlow had 3 saves, 1 clean sheet in 90 minutes. Leno had 1 bonus point, a clean sheet, and also played 90 minutes. Again, all 4 of them played well last week. It might be a little bit different for 1 or 2 this week, depending on matchups. But there was a couple of disappointments, which we will go through in our next segment. So for our defenders, who did we have, Haider?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that you look at the goalkeepers and pretty much all of them were much lower down in the league. And something I will say for you guys, when you're looking to pick a keeper, I do think that it's a strategy that I like to take. And for years, I've gone with the more expensive keeper, like the Liverpool or the United or the City, the top 6 keepers. But I think it's quite a lot of money to put on a keeper, and a lot of the time they don't get many saves. And you look at, obviously, with Guaita, he had 5 saves, didn't he, Ciaran? So definitely, I'd be looking maybe at someone like Pope and those sort of players for your goalkeeping position. But yeah, so look, the defenders was an interesting one because usually what you see the fullbacks or the wingbacks being the ones that get the most points. And the 2 top point scorers for the defenders this week were Gabriel from Arsenal. I know that's going to be a particularly hard one for some United fans. Look, I actually thought, looking at the way he played, shaky start, but he was very, very good. I believe he passed or touched the ball the most times for Arsenal, which shows what sort of player he's going to be. He's going to be, in some respects, he's going to be almost that deep line playmaker for Arsenal. When we actually go on to the points, he scored, valued at 5 million. Only 8.6% selected him, but he ended up getting 15 points, which is phenomenal. He got a clean sheet. He scored a powering header. And I believe he got 3 bonus points. I don't have that in front of me, but I would assume with 15 points, he came out on top. Surprising one. And when you look at the fixtures next week, I think there's a shout to have him in as well again because they're playing West Ham, and Arsenal could be sitting on 6 points by the end of Saturday. So he was a great shout for people. Like I said, only 8.6%. That's a differential, really, isn't it? In some respects. Next person as well is Roman Saiss. Is it Roman Saiss?
Yeah.
His name? Yeah, Roman Saiss. Yeah. I keep on thinking of Roman Grosjean, the F1. But no, so Saiss is an interesting one. When he came up from the Premier League, came up to Premier League with Wolves, he was actually a midfielder, defensive midfielder, but he has actually been converted into a defender, and he again plays as a centre back in the 3. Scored a header, got 15 points, only selected by 4.9% as well. He scored a goal, clean sheet. Wolves were fantastic in that opening 20 minutes. Very, very good. And again, 5 million. He's an interesting one. Someone that I wouldn't have thought of putting in because I focus a lot of my attention onto the fullbacks. But very interesting to see in game week 1 that we saw actually 2 defenders, 2 centre backs push forward and get the most points. And I'll touch on the two players that who got 14 points and who were just pipped. And that's Castagne from Leicester, the new left back signing, and Reece James. We all saw what Reece James could do. I had Reece James in, and rated at 5 million. I honestly would say, look, Chelsea's defense is a little bit shaky, but Reece James is a very interesting differential option. I don't think a lot of people thought about him because you think of Chelsea's defense and it's poor, but Reece James is going to get forward. Reece James has an eye for goal. He's the best, in my opinion, probably the best shooting right back in the league. I would say he's above Trent in that respect. I think he can really offer you something going forward. Defensively, I think Chelsea are still a bit of a worry, but he got 14 points. He got an assist as well for Kurt Zouma. He's taking corners. That's a big thing. Guys, if you want a defender, put Reece James in. That's my opinion. I've got him in. Playing Liverpool next week, it might be difficult. And the other one's Castagne, and he's someone I looked at. In the end, I went for the cheaper option in James Justin. Again, he did well. He got 9 points. He got a clean sheet, and I believe he got an assist, I think, or a bonus point. But when you look at Castagne, I think that Leicester's fullbacks will get forward, and that's very key because that's the way that Rodgers wants them to play. And he did fantastically well, 14 points, 3.8% owned, 5.5 million. So he's a little bit more on the expensive side. But I think if you're going to pick a Leicester defender, he's the more expensive option, I would say, at 5.5 million. And James Justin for me would be the cheaper option at 4.5. So some fantastic options there. Some starting ones, I probably wouldn't put Gabriel and Saiss in, but you never know. If Arsenal carry this on, I think Gabriel could be a fantastic option.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we move on to our midfielders, and this is where you see a lot of the kind of superstars of the Premier League playing in. So you had the likes of Aubameyang, Salah, Mane, who were probably the most owned players in fantasy football last week, but only one of them actually really got into this kind of top list, and that was Salah, obviously. So I think he got the most amount of points for the whole week. So he got 20. So anybody that got made him their captain probably won their game week from last week anyway. So he obviously got his hat-trick, got 3 bonus points, played 90 minutes. But then the next kind of, 2, I would say, were kind of surprising. So you had Jeff Hendrick from Newcastle, who got 14 points because he got an assist, a goal. He also, in the position he plays, got the clean sheet and also got his bonus. And then the one that I was kicking myself for not playing because I was talking about it last week was Willian. So those 3 assists kind of separated him. He also got 14, he got 14 points as well. There was the clean sheet, the 2 bonus points, and came off in the 74th minute. But again, when you can have a player like Willian that's producing now, he didn't seem to do that for a while at Chelsea, but it was a very good start for Arsenal. I think the problem that people might have is obviously who's going to be the player that's going to reap the most points for Arsenal. Last week it was Willian. I can only imagine that's pretty soon it'll end up being someone like Aubameyang. He didn't have as great of a week as Willian and Salah, but again, it was still pretty productive. I think the fact that he got a yellow card didn't help as well. But again, like you said before, they play against West Ham this week, so you should see quite a lot of attacking football from Arsenal. They should have a lot of opportunities. West Ham are one of those teams that I really struggle to see them kind of picking up many points this season because of how they just don't look like a team. So again, I think Willian's a good option. Also, on the higher end, you could go back with Aubameyang. I'd assume that he'd be in the kind of top scorers this week as well. And then you have Jorginho. So again, Chelsea weren't that great, but when you have a penalty taker that can be on your team, and really he's probably one of the players that Chelsea are going to be playing pretty much every single week. They haven't bought too many in his position, which is amazing considering the amount of players that they bought. But yeah, so he got the goal, assist, 2 bonus points, and played 84 minutes. Again, if you can have your central midfielder in your team taking the penalties, it's always good. So with that, we'll move on to the forwards. So Haider.
Absolutely. Adding on to sort of Willian, the reason why I didn't put him in and the reason why I'd be reluctant to put him in, I believe, what was he valued at? 8 million, was it?
Yeah.
Ciaran? Something like that. My problem with Willian, and I think if you talk to any Chelsea fan, look, on his day, Willian's a fantastic player. He is a fantastic player, but it's that consistency piece which is so key to any successful fantasy football team, any successful football team. And that's why you see Chelsea fans are not particularly upset that Willian's gone, but it was still fun to start to make fun of them because Willian obviously got 2 or 3 assists. But look, you got to look for those differentials. If Jorginho plays every week, which I'm not sure if he will. I know he played, and he obviously played majority of the game. But if he does start every week, he's a really not good cheap option to have because, he takes penalties. And in that midfield, you've got to have 1 or 2 of those, below 7 million sort of players that will supplement. My bet was Bowen. He didn't do anything at all, really. 6.5. Good player. But, that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? And look, on the forwards, not surprising to see Jamie Vardy at the top. He left off. Well, he started where he left off, really, didn't he? 2 goals, clean sheet, 3 bonus points, 13 points. Rated or valued at 10 million is good value for Jamie Vardy. If you're looking at the likes of Harry Kane, who's very expensive at 12, Jamie Vardy's, I think he's a bit of a differential this year. I haven't got him in. The way I go is you got to have a Salah and Aubameyang now. For me, I think they're both going to be the top scorers. And then after that, and you probably got to have, we'll talk about sort of defenders later, but obviously someone like Trent. And Vardy's a funny one because I think he could potentially be a differential. But he was selected by 22.4%, so nearly a quarter of the game week players selected him. So he was fantastic. And Leicester were very good. It was West Brom, but they were decent. Calvert-Lewin surprisingly came in joint second with Jimenez and the one that I tipped to be signing of the season, Callum Wilson. You look at Calvert-Lewin, I mean, what a header, but what a cross by Luca Dean. I mean, phenomenal. And already Calvert-Lewin's gone up, I believe, 1 million. He's 7.1 now. 8 points, 1 goal, clean sheet, 2 bonus points. Only selected by 11.1%. I've always been a bit iffy on Calvert-Lewin because I just think that I don't know if he's a good enough striker to be leading the line for Everton. But, in the last season under Ancelotti, he's proved a lot of people wrong. More service will now be provided for him. Look at the players he's got behind him. You've got James now. He could be a really, really good option. So, depending on who Everton play, I'm just having a look now. They're playing West Brom. Yeah, he's a great shout. He's a very, very good shout. We'll talk about that later. And then finally, the last 2, Jimenez and Wilson. Look, Raul Jimenez, we've spoken many times on my podcast. As United fans, we would bite your hand off for Raul Jimenez, the perfect Premier League striker. He's quite old-fashioned number 9, but he's actually got fantastic technique. The way he finished that goal was brilliant. The way he was able to just slightly pause and just guide it into the net using the pace of the ball was fantastic. He scored a goal, 2 bonus points, a clean sheet. Wolves were very impressive in that first 20. Rated at 8.5 million. And look, a lot of people think he should be one of those definites in your team. And look, I'd argue he probably is. And I think 20% selected him, so they agree with me. But, they've got Man City. He could potentially cause a lot of problems for them. We don't know what we're going to see from City's defence. Fantastic weekend. Callum Wilson, for me, look, he's a bargain. He's 6.5 million. If you don't have Wilson in your team, I think you probably got to put him in your team. Because I think when you look at Callum Wilson and you look at the firepower he had or the service he had at Bournemouth in that last season, it was pretty much non-existent. When Fraser stopped playing as well, didn't he? So looking at Newcastle, there's a bit more there. There's Almiron, there's Sam Maximan, there's Shelby can play balls in. I honestly think, and look, Jeff Hendrick played, he scored as well, didn't he? So I honestly think that Wilson, for me, will be the signing of the season. And if you can hit any sort of form he did at Bournemouth a few seasons ago, and Fraser hits the same form, then Newcastle, again, they'll shoot up the table and they'll be mid-table. So 13.4% selected him. Thought it'd be more, but yeah, he had a fantastic game week. And yeah, he's my dark horse. He's my option in attack.
Yeah, I'm happy to be part of that 13.4% that selected him last week. So
Absolutely,
he will probably be in my team for the whole season. So yeah, there was a lot of good performances, but there was a lot of disappointing ones where we expected some more from. While a lot of these might be some of the cheaper options, again, we expected them to kind of do a little bit better than what they actually produced in the first week. We've seen it. We've spoken about teams in general before, where we've spoken about West Ham, Southampton, etc. But what we're going to do again is I'll go through the goalkeepers and midfielders, and Haider will go through the defenders and strikers. So in terms of for the goalkeepers, one was actually the goalkeeper that I picked on my team, and it didn't work out too well for me, was Aaron Ramsdale for Sheffield United.
Yeah, that did not work out well, did it, mate?
He struggled big time, and it was very odd. Sheffield United didn't look like themselves from last week. What I would suggest for anybody that did pick Ramsdale is you probably want to wait a week or two and see, was it just one game, or is this going to be the way Sheffield United are going to play all season? Because again, even the kind of popular picks for the 4.5 million goalkeepers didn't perform too well either, because one of the more popular ones was Matt Ryan, who had a terrible game against Chelsea. He realistically was at fault for 2 of their goals, and really made him go down as well, also only getting 1 point. But I think the biggest disappointment probably was one of the higher valued players, and that would have been Alisson for Liverpool. I'd say with all the Liverpool fans out there, there's probably a lot of people that owned Alisson. And obviously you have to look at the matchups, regardless of who you're playing against. They're against Leeds, who are going to be an attacking side. But I think the worry is how easily they were able to get through the Liverpool defence. And if that is something that continues to happen this season, you probably don't want to have Alisson in your team if they're going to concede goals. Look, it worked out for Liverpool because they won the game, but in terms of fantasy for your defenders and also for your goalkeeper, it's probably not the best to be putting in Alisson in goal. And until we see the likes of City and United, we probably have to reserve judgment for those high-priced goalkeepers as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think you're completely spot on, and I'm going in a similar vein. The obvious defender is Trent Alexander-Arnold. You go and spend $7.5 million. I don't remember a defender being that expensive. Yeah, mate, it's a massive chunk of my defense. If I look at the rest of my defense, I mean, I had Kieran Tierney and Dan James. God, Reece James. I did not have Dan James. Don't worry. Yeah. Reece James, and they did fantastic for me. But Trent was disappointing. And look, taking out obviously the fantasy football aspect, but that's what we're here for. But actually, on the pitch, he really struggled. He really, really struggled defensively. You always bring him in the side because he's almost like an extra winger, isn't he? And when you think at 7.5, and you're trying to get a winger that will have that much creative output, it's a great shout in your fantasy team. Look, let's not be prisoners of the moment. He's still going to be a great asset throughout the season, but disappointed me. Could have scored an own goal if you saw the one that was ruled out for offside. He just had a shocker. And look, the same could have been said for Van Dijk if he hadn't scored from the corner. So, yeah, as a collective, Liverpool, obviously you mentioned Alisson, but Liverpool, whose defense was so tight for most of the season, yeah, that was disappointing. And I would be avoiding Alisson probably at all costs, just because of his price as well, even though he'll probably get a lot of clean sheets. The next one was Matt Doherty, which was obviously one which a lot of people, again, he was a permanent fixture. He has been since Wolves have come to the Premier League, and he's always looked better, I think, well, more comfortable as a wing-back. Playing in a back four, he missed a really big chance. It could have been completely different for him this week. He missed a big chance early on. Issue is, when you're playing in that Jose side and he's playing in a back four, how many opportunities is he going to have to go up? If you think about the City game last year where he scored, remember that winner in the 3-2 win, where he was pretty much on the edge of the box and hit that low driving shot into the bottom left-hand corner. I don't see him doing the same at Tottenham. If they're going to sign Reguilon, he might be a better option because I expect we know with Jose when one fullback goes up, the other one sits and tucks in almost as like a third centre back. We saw that with Aurier. He was the one last season. That was the one that was he was almost playing like a winger at times. Got quite a few assists and goals at the end of the season. But I really have doubts whether Doherty at the money that he's at is a wise choice, and I'd be avoiding all of Spurs' defence is like a plague. Honestly, they're high valued. You look at Alderweireld 5.5. Davis I wouldn't have Eric Dyer. So yeah, tough one for Spurs fans. I don't see many options for them at all, even if you look at the midfield and attack. I really don't. I think we'll talk about it later, but I think Son's one of them. But again, would you put Son in over Bruno? Probably not, with the way that the styles are played. So these are things you've got to take into account. And the third defender, I'm just going to go as a collective because they're all in the same bracket. But it's the Sheffield United defenders. It's the Egan, O'Connell, Stevens. 2 goals conceded. They all got around 1 and 2 points, obviously with yellow cards. Again, they were your go-to. They were your staple defenders last season because they were fantastically priced. They offered a goal threat. You saw with Egan did it a few times. Stevens also had a goal threat, but they were just so poor. And coupling that with Ramsdale, it's one game. And I did tweet out at the time, are we going to see Sheffield United, potentially having second season syndrome? Look, and a lot of people said to me, relax, one game. Fine. I'm not saying it's not, but I don't expect them to hit the heights they did last season. I expect them to stay in the league. Obviously, they're a very well-drilled side. But those are sort of my 3. And if I had to be a betting man, which ones to keep, I'd be keeping Trent. And the other ones, I'd be thinking very hard whether I want them in my team.
Yeah, it's a big issue. I think a lot of people where they probably lost a lot of points last week was in the defense because you probably had a lot of people with Trent, with Robertson, not so much Van Dijk because he scored the goal, but even some of the lower priced options, like some people were talking about Ben White as well. You think Brighton would have been a bit more sturdy against Chelsea. It looked like they might have been, but then a couple of mistakes. And you saw Chelsea get a pretty relaxed 3-1 victory. With the midfield, there was a lot of options here that you could have picked from. Now, the one that I picked, because I would say there's a lot of people that would have him, would have been Sadio Mane. So when you're spending the amount that you are on Mane and for him to only get 2 points, it's a problem. And look, it's not going to be an issue throughout the season. The only kind of issue that you have is often you don't see Salah and Mane get the high points in the same week. So it could be just the fact that Salah got the 3 this week and then Mane could get it next week and vice versa. So it's always a risky proposition when you're kind of picking one or the other. So that's why often you look at some of the top teams. So when you look at United, for example, who's going to get most of the assists, you're probably looking at Bruno. When you look at City, you're looking at De Bruyne. Even though you have some excellent players in Sterling and Aguero, you see the productivity from De Bruyne, and it's good. What you'll see for the 2 players for Liverpool is that you might not see the high points for both in the same week. So make sure that you do only keep one of them in your side, because I don't think it's worth having both of them in your team. The next one, you mentioned it before, was Son. So again, only got 2 points, but unless Spurs start to change the way they play, it's probably not the best idea to have a Spurs attacker in your team because they're overpriced and they don't create enough chances. Look, it might change with the likes of Gareth Bale and stuff coming in. But again, even when he does, I assume whoever's in control of fantasy is going to put him pretty high up the list in terms of the prices. And really, until we see how they play, if they continue playing the way they did, they're just not going to create enough chances for you to get high points. So for the value, it's just not there. And then the last one, I think everybody knows where I'd probably go for here, and it's Kai Havertz. So he got a lot of stick last week, and probably a lot of people like myself put him in, probably waiting for the Cities and United to get to play, and it was disappointing. But again, if you're a big fan of Havertz and you want to keep him in the team, look, he's 8.5. I think he'll hit the heights that we've expected this year. It might take a little bit of time, but it might be one of those that for the first while, you might have to look at the matchups and see how many chances will he be able to create. And that's kind of one of the things that you probably have to look at this week. But yeah, and then I guess if you're looking at kind of one extra one, it goes with what you said with Sheffield United. So Lundstrom, who was one of the top point scorers in midfield last year, only got 2 points. So again, just that whole Sheffield United team has been a bit underwhelming in week one. But again, I'd say you probably want to wait it out for 2 to 3 weeks and see if they continue playing that way. If they do, then it's probably best to start thinking of transfers for those Sheffield United players.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Look, it's you got to think with your head, not your heart. That is my first rule on fantasy football. Whenever I think with my heart and I go and choose a load of United players, or I think then you don't have to be a football fanatic to actually be good at fantasy football. My cousin is like a clever guy. He works at an investment bank, and he used to do fantasy football because he was so good at analyzing data, and you smash everyone. So this is the point. You got to be clever. Don't pick someone, and don't not pick someone because they play for, I don't know, Liverpool and you're a United fan. Stupid. Like, come on, just be a little bit more open-minded. But anyway, enough of bashing people. But I would agree with you, mate. Look, I'm going to go for the first one is Bobby Firmino. He really disappointed, mate. He got 1 point in a game where there were 7 goals. We know his goal record at Anfield was very poor last season and won. I really think that he needs to be under more scrutiny, not just in fantasy football, but in the team as well, because I know he has... look, I'm actually one of those that can value what he brings to the team. If you actually watch him and the way that Liverpool play tactically, you will know if you watch them that the fullbacks provide that width. They go so far up wide. They're almost wingers in that aspect. Then you have Firmino dropping deep to collect the ball, and then Salah and Mane running those out-in inverted runs. That's why they're scoring so many goals. So you can see that Firmino is actually slotting in more than the false nine, probably dropping back to like an attacking midfielder. And when they're obviously defending, he is leading the press. So he has his place, but when you're looking from a fantasy football point of view, it doesn't matter what sort of striker you are. That's just not good enough. His numbers are not good enough now for a season. And he's playing for a club like Liverpool, a team like Liverpool that are creating chances upon chances, and he's still not getting goals. That suggests to me that, and it's not like he doesn't get chances. That's the key thing as well. So that suggests to me that he could be an issue. And when I look, I'm going to compare him to Timo Werner. I don't think Timo Werner was disappointing. He got 5 points. He got an assist for the penalty. I thought he was electric. His pace and acceleration is going to be a great asset. But when you look at Werner and you look at Werner's ability, I think, and Firmino, I think Liverpool might have missed a trick not getting Werner. I think he probably would have taken them to that next level. So for me, I'm toying with the idea of having Werner in the side. We'll talk about that later. But Firmino was my first one. My second one was Danny Ings because he had a fantastic season last season. He's gone up in price as well. I actually had Che Adams because I thought Adams is cheaper as well. Allowed me to put a bit more money in other areas. But very disappointing. Southampton, very disappointing as a team in general, I thought, mate. I know we had this discussion, but I expected better. I expected him to score more goals. And he disappointed me. I think he will score again this season, but you never know. He could have a dip like people do after a very good season. And finally, keeping with the Spurs, I guess the Spurs sort of frustration because they've got a lot of very good players. And that's the thing. You look at the players, Son, Kane, these are the sort of players. Dele Alli are the sort of players under Pochettino you would have 100% had in your team. You'd be trying to get all 3 in your team at one point. But now I wouldn't have any of them. And I'm not saying they're not good players. There's just statistically, Spurs don't create enough. They're not getting into enough positions. I think I read somewhere that Kane had 1 touch in the box in the first half. We spoke about it.
I think it was 0.
So for me, Kane's 12 million is too expensive to have in your side if he's getting one or less than 1 touch in the box in the first half. And so he got 2 points. And for me, I'd be avoiding him as well. He will score goals. That's the key, though. He will score goals. Harry Kane will always score goals, but I don't think he's getting enough chances. He's feeding off scraps. Like you said, if Bale comes in, it could change a few things. But and the final one, actually, one more I'm going to add. It's not really, he wasn't really a flop, but he didn't start. That was Rodrigo. I think a lot of people had him in his side. He's very reasonably priced. But I think something you have to understand with Bielsa is that Bielsa does not rotate his squad at all. This is actually a thing. Bamford is going to be the one that starts. If you want to go for a lead striker, Bamford probably is the one. Even though he scores in bursts, that's another thing. He's a confidence player. But the thing about Rodrigo, and you saw it with Nketiah when he went to Leeds and he came back from loan because Bamford's very loyal to his players. Bielsa's very loyal to his players. He loves Bamford. So something I will say is if you guys are thinking of putting Rodrigo in, look, I'm giving you all the tips. Mad. This is free. This channel is free. But no, I think Ciaran should have probably listened to me as well before he put Rodrigo in because he gave away the penalty. But, no, if you think that looking at that starting 11 Leeds have, unless there's an injury, I think you'll see Cooper come back in defence. But unless there's an injury, that's going to be the same starting 11 until probably Christmas. So Rodrigo is going to be phasing very slowly unless Bamford gets injured. Even if Bamford stops scoring, he will play. So if you're going to pick a lead striker and they've got a very favourable game against Fulham, I'd be looking towards Bamford or one of their front three because I think that's where you'll see the goals. So that is my forwards.
Perfect. So then one of the key talking points every week is transfers. So everybody gets one free transfer, but then the question usually comes in, how many points do I kind of risk in bringing more players in? What I would always say is the most you want to ever risk is 4. You don't want to make more than 2 transfers in 1 week. Look, it's a bit different this time around because you didn't have the likes of City and United playing in that first weekend, and you probably wanted to maximize the amount of points you could get. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 3 transfers each, what we think would be a good option. I think we've spoken about 1 or 2 already, but the main one that I would say is Bruno Fernandes is one that probably has to be brought in. He creates too many chances. He scores goals. He takes penalties. He was one of the top scorers from January up until the end of the season last year. So I think if you have that kind of 10.5 points where you can swap someone in and out, I think Bruno is definitely one to go for. The second one that I'm going to use is Bamford again, just from the Leeds perspective. You've seen how attacking that they are. If they're going to continue to play that way against every team, you probably need whoever's going to be starting up front for them. It seems to be Bamford at the moment. So again, it's not too expensive either. He's right now, I think he's 5.6 points. So again, or 5.6 million. So again, it's a pretty easy one to kind of put in there. And then the last one, again, I've mentioned it just before now, he's gone up a little bit in value. If you were looking for someone to kind of grab the assist, especially for this weekend against West Ham, Willian might be a good option too, just because, again, I don't trust West Ham defensively. So the more kind of players you can get in that are playing in those weaker matchups, the better it would be. What about yourself, Haider?
All right, mate. I was on mute. No, you've picked some fantastic ones. I think the Leeds one with Bamford is a great shout. I'm going to also go with Leeds, and it's Jack Harrison scored a goal at Anfield. I think when you're looking at that Leeds side, they're going to play like that against whoever they play. They went to Anfield and they dominated possession 52%. They're going to score goals. I think where I'd avoid with Leeds is probably the defence. They look like they could be fairly open, but they're going to be an entertaining outfit. So Jack Harrison's my first one. I think he'd be an absolutely excellent signing. I think with Bamford, I don't trust his consistency. So with Harrison at 5.5 million, he's also the 7th most bought midfielder in game week 2. And that's over 85,000 transfers in. I'm just reading it off, but I just thought I'd give you those little stats. These little nuggets will help. And obviously, Ciaran's mentioned Fernandes. Look, I think you'd be crazy to look beyond him. But just because of his numbers, I think, look, this is a very bold statement, and you can probably laugh at me at the end of the season. But the way he was going, he was on par to put sort of De Bruyne numbers up, and I do expect him to carry on. He just doesn't seem like this player to me, and I'm not like this about any other player, by the way. I'm just so confident with Fernandes, even with Martial, that have this confidence that he's going to carry on with his form. But with Fernandes, I just know he takes penalties as well. That's massive. But I'm just with him. I think you just got to find a way to put him in. But I'm not going to go with him because obviously you've gone for him. I'm going to go for Martial just because I think with Martial, he's going to be playing striker now. So last season he was in midfield. He's at 9 million. I think that's phenomenal value when you're looking at someone like Kane, who's 12, Aguero's 12, and a few others are a bit more expensive as well. So for me, Martial is United's main man. The question is whether he's going to be consistent enough, and that's the key. We saw at the end of the season, I mean, he pretty much carried United. So for me, he'd be a fantastic option. The last one's tough because I think I'm just going to pick two names out because I think from Newcastle, because they've got a very favourable fixture against, I think, Brighton, although Brighton are a good side. But you obviously got Wilson, who we've said many times, and even Jamal Lewis is a possibility. But my main one, I think you'd be crazy not to have him in your defence. If you're looking to move out Trent possibly for a game because they are playing Chelsea, I predicted that to be a high-scoring 2-2 draw. But I'd be looking at Luca Digne at 6 million. You saw that he produced for the cross for Calvert-Lewin. He's obviously the one, I think, who will take probably the set pieces. You might see Hammers taking a few, but Digne has been one of the most creative fullbacks since he's joined Everton, since he's come into the league. So for me, I think that's a standout player for me that I expect to produce big points this weekend.
Yeah, and just before we get on to kind of our last segment, everybody just remember to like and subscribe. Send in any of your questions for next week, and we'll get to them as well in the segment too. So then the last one we're just going to go through, and we've mentioned some of this already, it's kind of the best matchups for this weekend because, again, a lot of people want to be making transfers, and really what you need to do is not just think of the names, but think of who they're playing. So the first one that I would have went for, and I've actually done this in my own team, is I brought in Calvert-Lewin against because they're playing against West Brom, and really West Brom defensively have been struggling as of late. So I would say that's probably a good option. My second one would be Aubameyang against West Ham. Again, from what I mentioned before, defensively and as a whole structure of a team, West Ham they don't look like they've come together at the start of the season. They don't even look prepared for the beginning of the Premier League season. So I think it's a good chance to be able to bring in, if you don't have Aubameyang, and let's say you brought in Mane instead, to maybe swap them out for this weekend. And then finally, I have one of the players that's already in my team is Callum Wilson, because he's up against Fulham this week. And again, we saw just how poor defensively Fulham were. So again, what I like to do is if you're not sure on a player to bring in, you should always look at those matchups, look to see who's the poor defenses that they're coming up against. Who are they going to have more possession of the ball? They're going to create more chances, because that's really what you want to look for. So those would be my three for this upcoming week. And what would be your three, Haider?
Oh, it's a tough one because I haven't done my team yet. But so I'll be toying with the idea. Look, as I was saying earlier, you can't really look past Everton. I can't believe I'm saying this because you know what? The years gone by, I've just avoided Everton like a plague. They're just not a side that I've thought who had the energy, and they didn't score enough. They conceded too many. But Luca Digne is going to be the one that I'm going to bring in for sure, because I just think that I didn't see anything from West Brom to suggest that they could avoid relegation. Leeds is the only team out of the three. So yeah, that'll be my first one. My second one, look, I'm going to go United, and I'm going to go for Bruno Fernandes. I just think you can't look past him. It's going to be a struggle to fit him into my team. I do already have Salah and Salah and Aubameyang. And Aubameyang, as you said, has got a very favourable fixture. I'll be looking to put him in. And so yeah, for me, Bruno is a definite. He takes penalties. I wouldn't be surprised if United get penalties. They've got the rest in their pockets. No, I'm kidding. No, they've just got very tricky wingers, and we're getting into the box more and more under Solskjaer. It's definitely a tactic that he wants: drive into that box, make it difficult, be direct. So I think Fernandes, I expect him to score as well. He'd be playing the furthest forward as well. And this is the thing that we have to remember, is that Bruno will be playing as a number in this. I expect to be much more closer to Martial, because I do think that if United do play a Van der Beek and a Pogba midfield, you'll see Van der Beek play that sort of box-to-box role, or he'll play a deeper role. So you'll have more creativity, is what I'm trying to say. Rather than Matic sitting further back, Pogba was further back, you'll see Bruno push so much further up and be more of an attacking threat. The last one's difficult because there's some interesting games. You could even say at Liverpool, Salah. You got to put Salah in, I think, because he's the player for me who's just always going to be out there at the end, and he scores in big games. I'm not convinced by Chelsea's defense at all. But then I look at Werner. I think Werner could cause that back four a lot of problems with his pace. But look, I'm probably going to go for Danny Ings against Tottenham. It's at home as well. I'm going to give him my sort of backing, because I think that when you look at Danny Ings, I think that he's going to have goals this season. Southampton play a fantastic brand of football. They're pretty much the opposite of what Tottenham will do. And I just can't see Tottenham surviving with that high intensity and high press. We saw that with Everton. Everton caught them up high up the field, and that's what Southampton will do. They'll press very high up. We saw that with United last season. So I think either one of Danny Ings or Che Adams could be a great shout against this Tottenham defence. I think Tottenham might struggle this year, even though I tipped them for 5th. I think they're going to struggle. And possibly one more. I'm just going to give you one more, mate. I know you've done 3.
As well.
Yeah, might as well. Villa are back. Jack Grealish, new contract. Rated, I believe, about 7 or 8 million. I need to check that. But you guys, I think he could be a great option. They are definitely a team which looks stronger, I think, on paper. But Grealish was a great influence. He was a great player to have last year. So if you're looking for someone maybe on the cheaper side than, the likes of a Bruno, then maybe a Grealish, who will probably be very influential. Well, he will be for Villa. So those are my not 3, 5 potential picks. I'm not going to make them all those changes, because then I'll have -20. So yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody can complain that we haven't been given them options for their transfers this week anyway. But just as a last kind of question, what would your normal strategy be when making transfers? Is there a certain amount of points you're willing to give up, or are you strictly you make 1 per week?
My problem throughout the years has been, so about 2 years ago, I had 2 or 3 fantastic years. I was up there. I was winning my leagues. I was hitting 2,000 points. My issue last year is I didn't get my team right at the beginning, and that's very important. You've got to get your team correct. I know people using their wild card, and people might laugh, but you know what? It's sensible, because you're better off going and instead of making 4 or 5 transfers and losing 20 points already, using that wild card, could help. But for me, what I was doing a lot last season, and my success was better as the season went on, was I was actually not even doing any transfers. I was thinking a week ahead. So when I was making my selections, I was thinking a week ahead. And for me, I think the key is, no more than 4, as you were saying. But again, I like to pack my midfield, or I like to play 3 at the back. This week I played 4-3. I don't trust the defenses in the Premier League. That's my thing. I think they're not good enough defenders. There's too many. Well, they're excellent going forward. They're going to give you points. You look at Trent, Robertson, Luca Digne, but I don't trust the defenders. And you look at United's defense, you wouldn't look at any of them and think there's a goal threat there. That's a problem. Yeah. So for me, I like to play 3. So that would be my strategy. I do sometimes go to -8. I'll do 3 transfers, but that's like my limit. But that's on a rare occasion. But what I would say is I like to go 3 at the back, and then it's either 5 in midfield and 2 up top, or 4 in midfield and 3 up top. I think this year the midfield is strong. You look at who's in the midfield at Aubameyang. So I'd be saying, my strategy would be saying, pack that midfield with quality, because they get an extra point with the goal as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the completely right thing to do. So really you want to focus on getting as much quality in that midfield, because like you said, you get the extra point if they score a goal. And with the players that they've put in midfield this year, a lot of them are the attacking options. So I hope we've given everybody enough tips for this week. Good luck with all your fantasy teams, and we will be back same time next week. Thanks for joining us today, Haider.
Cheers, mate, and always a pleasure. And you did a great job hosting. Kieran will be hosting this show, so I can relax. You don't have to hear my annoying.
You can chill.
Yeah, man, I need the chill. I've been, as someone said to me today on Twitter, you're like Alex Scott.
Everywhere.
And I was like, yeah, cloning myself. But no, nice one, mate, and great job. And yeah, we'll see you.